What's up, guys? 3-1 last night. Trying to start clawing back. Been treading water the last few weeks. Hasn't been good. Yesterday, the only loss was the Cincinnati Reds, and that looked decent early. They had a 1-0 lead early, and Hunter Green was the better of the two starters in that game, but their bullpen did not hold up, and they wound up losing that game. I handicapped the starting pitching matchup right in that game. Didn't think the bullpen was going to factor in that much, but the game was close, so it did. Not great. And then everything else won. Phoenix Suns, easy win. The under in the Orioles game looked good the whole way pretty much, and then it got really a little bit too close for comfort at the end, but was still able to hit. And then the crazy game of the night in the NHL, I just stopped even paying attention to it. Vegas was winning 4-1, I believe, going into the third period, even though Arizona actually had more shots, more hits, a higher face-off percentage. They're winning a lot of the main stats, but they were losing on the scoreboard. Didn't look at the final. I was like, whatever, that's a loss. Looked this morning, Arizona won 7-4. They scored 6 goals in the final 9 minutes of the game, including 3 in like a little bit over a minute to tie the game. And then the last one wound up being an empty netter, but still a crazy way to end that game. A barrage of goals as Arizona gets there on the money line as an underdog. So that's pretty sweet. Move on to today. Of course, we'll talk about college basketball first, where we have the Final Four, Alabama and UConn. Or actually, I'll talk NC State, Purdue, actually, even though they're flipped on the betting board. For some reason, Alabama, UConn is first, but NC State, Purdue is the first game being played. NC State, in a lot of ways, does look like a square underdog, as they have been pretty much all tournament. They've been the hype. They're the Cinderella. They got 63% of the tickets according to pregame, but it also does say they have 68% of the cash. I'm not sure if that's really accurate. Purdue has gone up from 8 to 9. I have a slight lean to Purdue in this one, but it's not that strong. I mean, Purdue, they do look like they're motivated. They have some, I mean, of course, these teams are motivated. They're trying to win a championship, but Purdue may be extra motivated because of the knock on them for having lost to double-digit seeds the last 3 years in the tournament, and now it's so insane. They wind up matched up against another double-digit seed here, and that's going to be one of the narratives. Oh, Purdue can't beat double-digit seeds. I mean, they beat one this year, of course, but it was a 16 seed, so nobody cares about it. Actually, they beat 2, I guess. No, they didn't. Utah State was an 8. What am I saying? For some reason, I was thinking Utah State was a lower seed than that, but no, that was the second round game. Of course, that was an 8-9 winner. So yeah, NC State has not faced a double-digit seed yet, or excuse me, Purdue hasn't, but Purdue has beaten, of course, better teams than that. Purdue, they're also kind of getting the advantage of some of the foul calls there. Zach Edey. I mean, Zach Edey can get away with a lot, and you can't get away with as much against him, but we'll see how Burns plays against him. This is going to be an interesting game because both of these teams are more paint presence teams, even though Purdue actually shoots a really high 3-point percentage. They don't shoot a lot of the threes. Both of these teams play an inside game, a lot of paint game there, and it's going to kind of come down to Burns versus Zach Edey, although Purdue, I think, has the advantage in the guard play as well. But will Burns be able to match up against one of the only guys in the tournament who outsizes him fairly significantly? Although Burns is actually maybe even heavier than Edey is, but Edey is certainly taller. It's going to be a weird, interesting matchup, so we'll see how that goes. But my slight lean would be to Purdue on the side in that one, but I don't really have much on that game. It could be an interesting game, likely to be the lower scoring of these two games, as both of these teams kind of focus on defense first. Purdue does have an efficient offense as well, though. NC State, maybe not as much. I mean, NC State, ranking-wise, of course, are the worst team left in the tournament, and UConn is the best. The line has moved up on both favorites. UConn is up from 9.5 to 11.5, going through the 11.5 with juice. So you're not getting any value if you're playing UConn on the line. Like, UConn, you're going to be paying a premium to bet UConn, a team that's just been dominating. They've been on one of the most dominant runs in tournament history, actually now winning, I think, 10 straight tournament games by 13 or more points. So you're not getting the best of it if you're playing UConn, that's for sure. 62% of the tickets on them, so it does look like they are public a little bit, and the cash slightly less on them at 60%, but I would not play against UConn on the spread in this game. I would not want to do that. I think UConn has too many advantages. They slow the pace down significantly, which is not what Alabama wants at all. And we saw what UConn was able to do in the previous game against a fast-paced team in Illinois. Alabama plays even faster than Illinois. They want to try to play even faster. Illinois can kind of actually get in a little bit of a grind-out game. They were able to do it against Iowa State to some extent, but really could not handle it for an entire game against UConn. They kind of like hung in the first half, but really just could not do it. So I think that's going to be a big disadvantage for Alabama because you got to expect UConn being the better team and the slowdown team, the major slowdown team. This is a huge clash of paces here. UConn, one of the slowest teams in the country, and Alabama might be the number one fastest. I haven't looked at KenPom recently, but they've been somewhere near the number one fastest team most of the year. He actually has them at the 9th fastest team right now, and UConn 315th. So UConn, I mean, it's easier for a team to slow the pace down, but if it's the better team also being the slower pace team, that tends to be a huge edge for the slowdown team. As I said, UConn, what they did against Illinois, they're able to pretty much stifle these teams that focus on offense and don't play very good defense like Illinois. Illinois was the number 2 team in offensive efficiency when they faced off. They wound up 4th after that game, I guess. UConn's still number 1 and now number 4 in defensive efficiency. So power ratings wise, obviously the best team in the country. Alabama 3rd in offensive efficiency, one of the best offenses. But UConn even beats them out in offensive efficiency. They just don't seem like they're the better scoring team because they play so many fewer possessions with such a slow-paced game. Alabama also down at 105th in adjusted defensive efficiency on defensive efficiency, but it is a deficiency for Alabama. Freudian slip there. Alabama by far the worst defensive team remaining in the tournament, and I think that was already the case in the previous round, but now it's even more significant. But like I said, you see UConn matches up against teams that don't play good defense, play fast, want to play fast, I should say, and focus primarily on scoring. UConn's able to slow them down. So I think that's a big advantage for UConn there. The advantage goes to the slower paced defensive team, maybe not laying this many points, but that's an advantage. And then the additional advantage here that I think is harder to quantify is the fact that this is now the Final Four. This is going to be in a football stadium in Glendale, Arizona, I believe, where the Arizona Cardinals play. So the sight lines are way different. So you do have the court, and they do build like stands around the court to try to make it look like a basketball arena still, but you still have like the cavernous stadium kind of looming over you and like high ceilings and stuff, and it can affect the sight lines and affect teams that like to shoot the ball, especially shoot it from range. That is certainly Alabama. I think they might attempt the most three-pointers in the entire country. Alabama really, really relies on the three, and that might be a huge problem against a defensive team like UConn, and additionally with a stadium that style that they're not used to with sightlines like this. UConn plays a paint presence game and is more used to playing in an arena like this or in a stadium like this because they did it last year, of course. They won the championship. They were in the Final Four. So UConn has the advantage there as well, where Alabama, another disadvantage for them there. So a lot of disadvantages stack up against this Alabama team here. And UConn, as far as defending the three, they're actually pretty good at defending the three as well, I believe. They're 28th, according to KenPom, in 3-point percentage allowed. So they actually they make a higher percentage of their threes than they allow. So that could be a problem as well. Teams don't shoot the three particularly well against UConn at all. So Alabama's really going to need that to change. UConn actually shoots the three percentage-wise almost as well as Alabama does. They're both, I think, in like the UConn's in like the 60s, I think, percentage-wise. Alabama's in the 20s. Alabama actually shoots the two pretty well as well, but it's all going to come down to the three. And I think some of these things, like that's kind of strength on strength, or UConn doesn't allow a high 3-point percentage and Alabama shoots well from three, but up against a really good UConn defense like this, a team that's done pretty well defending the three as well, and in a cavernous stadium like this where your sight lines might be thrown off, especially early in the game, that's a disadvantage for Alabama. And instead of laying the points with UConn, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to bank on Illinois' offense struggling enough. And I don't mind this being a first half play as well, where they're getting like used to the sight lines and stuff, but I think I'm going to make this a full game plan. That's to play the Alabama-Indiana. Indiana's nowhere close to the tournament. The Alabama team total under 74.5 points, which seems really risky with the way Alabama's been scoring. Like the recreational bettors are not going to be playing an Alabama under, even if they know that UConn's the better team. They'll probably come in on this and think, oh, this is going to be a pretty high scoring game because UConn's put up high point totals the last few games, and Alabama's been scoring a ton of points as well because they are a very good scoring team. But I think it could be way different here if UConn's going to slow the pace down, which I think they're going to want to do because that's the opposite of what Alabama wants. And I think UConn may be successful in doing that. And Alabama, they're going to be jacking up threes, so it might be a little bit risky to do it. But I think because of the sight lines, I think they might struggle shooting the ball. For all the reasons I just said, and up against this UConn defense, I think we can do it. Alabama team total under 74.5 points, which, again, recreational bettors are going to look at this and see Alabama scoring like way higher point totals than that throughout the tournament and think that, like, this looks wrong. Like, it looks way too easy to take Alabama to score more points than that, but I'm not so sure about that. And when you get into these Final Four games, the sight lines, the defense becomes more intense. Everything like that kind of lends itself to a lower scoring game as well. Although this is lined with the totals, this should be the higher scoring of the two games for sure, with two efficient offenses, and of course Alabama being a very high scoring team, but we will see. That will be the play there. Moving on to the NBA, only 4 games today. I don't have a play here. I think the closest that I was going to be to making a play would have been to take the Cleveland Cavaliers against the LA Lakers, with the Lakers returning home from a road trip. And I think the Lakers, they're pretty secure in a play-in spot at this point. Houston is basically done, even though they're not technically eliminated yet. I think we can write Houston off. So I think LA guaranteed to be in one of the play-in spots, but they could still move up into the 7 or even the 6. They're only 2 games out of the 6, so I think they do still have a little bit of motivation in that regard, whereas Cleveland also has motivation as far as playoff seeding. They're sitting in the 3 spot, but only a game ahead of both Orlando and the Knicks, so could easily drop into the 5 seed, even where they wouldn't even be hosting a playoff series anymore if that were to happen. So both these teams are motivated for those reasons. And then Cleveland, I don't know, has some weird injury concerns. That's been typical of Cleveland over the last month or so. You don't know what's going on with their injury stuff, so you definitely got to pay attention to that as well. I just don't like the spot for the Lakers returning from a road trip, and I think being fairly secure, but both of these teams do also have the motivation. Cleveland's, I think, is a little bit more so, though, because they can't really afford to drop, whereas the Lakers could win and move up, but they're also not going to drop out of the playoffs at this point. So Cleveland also obviously is in the playoffs, so they could drop to a spot where they won't host a series. We'll go over to the NHL, where I actually have 2 plays. This is a big NHL card, man. I'm kind of looking at this and thinking, what do I want to do here? Pittsburgh, I think Pittsburgh, they're not in a really good spot returning home from a road trip, but I'm not going to play this game. They're returning home for a road trip. They just pulled off 3 pretty big wins in a row against the Rangers, one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference for sure. Then they beat the Devils. The Devils kind of spiraling, look like they might be almost done at this point, pretty much done. And then beating Washington, who's Pittsburgh's fighting to try to get a wild card here, and Washington is one of the main competition for that big win that they're coming off of. And now they face the Lightning, but Pittsburgh has more motivation in this one because the Lightning have already clinched a playoff spot. So that's why I don't like this that much. Normally, regular season, I would potentially look to go against Pittsburgh in the return home, coming off some big wins. But this is another big game for them against a playoff team. Pittsburgh is still fighting to get into the playoffs, so they can't afford to be unfocused. Tampa kind of can because they're already in the playoffs. So I can't deal with that one. Can't do that one. some other interesting games here. I mean, Florida's playing against my Bruins. Both teams are already in the playoffs, but it is a battle between two of the top teams in the conference, maybe the top two. So we'll see how that pans out. Winnipeg and Minnesota has playoff implications as well, with Minnesota still fighting, but they're 10 points out of the playoffs now. So it's not looking great for Minnesota. They're the last team that's not eliminated yet in the Western Conference. So they're looking close to being dead, but Winnipeg's already clinched a playoff spot. So I guess we'll see how that one goes as well. And then what else we got on the schedule here? A lot of, kind of just interesting games, really. And then Nashville and the Islanders, both teams coming off big wins as far as playoff implications are concerned. Although Nashville has been in and out of the last spot in the Pacific. Wait, are they? No, they're in the Central, right? Or wait, where? I don't even know where they are. Yeah, I think they must be in the Central, but I think Nashville has kind of been bouncing back and forth in and out of the wild card spots. However, it pans out there. But Vegas is back up in the third in the Pacific Division, and Nashville's back down into the top wild card spot. But with an 8-point lead over St. Louis, the closest competition to them in the wild card. But St. Louis does play, I believe, San Jose today, which should be a pretty winnable game for them. Nashville's sitting pretty well right now and coming off a nice big win, I believe, over over that St. Louis team, actually. So a big win there for Nashville for their playoff hopes there to remain in good position to get one of the playoff spots, sitting in the wild card spot right now. But they're playing up against the Islanders, who are also coming off a big win for that reason and got into the third seed in the Metro Division now. So they leaped through like numerous teams because they were sitting outside of the playoffs entirely. So it is a cluster in the East, man, with the Islanders, Flyers, Washington, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo. And if you want to throw New Jersey in there, if you go down to Buffalo, they're all separated by only 4 points. And then New Jersey only separated by 7 points between all those teams. And they're all fighting for 2 spots. But one of them is the Metro spot. So not all of them can get that spot. Only the teams in the Metro Division are fighting for that spot. Although, actually, I think that is all of those teams as well. It's most of those teams, at least. Man, it is a crazy situation in the East where basically almost every team that's not eliminated yet is still alive, kind of. And there's one wild card spot up for grabs because Tampa Bay pretty much is guaranteed to have the other one, either them or Toronto, I believe, if they might flip-flop there, because I think they're both in the Atlantic. It's a crazy situation there. In New York, the Islanders are coming off a win over the Blue Jackets and won 3 straight games to vault up into the third spot in the Metro. So sitting in the playoffs right now, in playoff position. But Islanders probably have more to lose in this game. The Nashville, highly unlikely they're going to get knocked out of the playoffs. So I think the Islanders actually have a little bit more motivation there and are the anti-public home underdog in that one now. But it looks like the line is flipped from Nashville, the underdog, to the favorite. So that's what's going on in that one. Interesting game. We'll go to the games that I'm actually on now. And Vancouver and the Kings, I guess, is an interesting game too. I believe between a playoff team in Vancouver and a team that might have a little bit more motivation in the LA Kings, because the LA Kings are in the last wild card spot right now in the West, but they do have a 7-point lead over St. Louis right now. So sitting decently, but obviously they're less safe than Vancouver is. What am I actually on in the hockey? I do have two. Do I have 2 plays? Yes, I do. Ottawa plus 100 is going to be the first play here, although it looks like New Jersey is who they're playing against. New Jersey's gone up from minus 115 to minus 118. New Jersey is a road favorite here. 67% of the tickets and 78% of the cash on Ottawa. So for some reason, it looks like Ottawa's the public team. I'm not sure I buy that because New Jersey is the team with the better record. Why would the public be coming in on Ottawa, a team that's nearly eliminated? They're that only team in the East that's far enough back that they're like basically eliminated without technically being eliminated yet. They're the only team that's in that position, but I think they might have motivation here to try to win a home game against a team that is fighting to get into the playoffs, and maybe they'd enjoy playing spoiler against the New Jersey Devils team. So even though New Jersey does have more to play for here potentially, because Ottawa's basically eliminated, New Jersey's just holding on, but New Jersey is a road favorite. the pressure might be on, man. It does look like the cash discrepancies on Ottawa, although the line has actually moved up on New Jersey. So I'm not sure that's the case either, but the market's hard to read in this one. I'm just looking at what the situation is here, man. New Jersey, yeah, they've lost 3 games in a row. So you might argue this could be a bounce back here. And they do have multiple days off. So that could break that like losing momentum. So I do like that usually being the case, but the game against the Rangers was this really tough game, and it was a really tough way to lose that game. They were down 2-0 in the game, came back, took a 3-2 lead, I believe, and then still lost 4-3. Huge game against a Rangers team, that massive rivalry game. That game broke out into fights immediately. That was spillover from something that happened in the previous game, I think on March 11th against the Rangers. There was some fight or something that happened. The game on Wednesday against the Rangers, basically, as soon as the puck dropped, the game stopped 2 seconds into the game. Every player on the ice started fighting. All 10 players got penalized. I think there were 12 penalties assessed in the first 2 seconds, and 8 players got ejected. It was unlike anything that you pretty much ever see. One of the biggest brawls in hockey history, probably. That emotional of a game, and that's what New Jersey's coming off of, and they might be feeling like they're hey, looking at the standings, man, I mean, they really don't have that much of a shot, even though I just listed out what the scenario is. They're 7 points out from Philadelphia from the last wild card, and there are 4 teams between them and Philadelphia, so it's highly unlikely. They're going to have to contend with all of those teams, highly unlikely, and coming up that brutal game against the Islanders, or excuse me, against the Islanders. No, it was against the Rangers, excuse me, the other New York team. That's just kind of ridiculous, man. And looking at the Ottawa side, Ottawa does only have 1 day off, but they're also on a 2-game loss streak, and they might be in more of a bounce back spot because they didn't have like a really crazy like brawl type of game in their last game. They lost embarrassingly, although it was to Florida, a good team, sure, but they lost 6-0. And before those recent 2 losses, they were playing decently. They were still playing motivated hockey, man. They won 5 games in a row before that. They won at New Jersey as well, but does that mean New Jersey is going to have a little bit of revenge motive, or Ottawa might let up a little bit? I don't think so, man, because when Ottawa's coming off a 6-0 loss like that, you have pride, man. You're going to be embarrassed coming off a game like that, and you're going to want to play a decent game after that, I think. So I think that's going to motivate Ottawa. I think it puts them in a bounce back. So on New Jersey, I think it's going to be tough for them to bounce back after that Rangers game. Remember, they put in that much of an effort both in the game and into all the fighting and the emotion that went into that game. This has got to be an emotional hangover spot, even though they do have a couple days off. I don't like the spot here for New Jersey. And after Ottawa, I think they also play a better team as well. Yeah, they play Nashville, Toronto twice, Philadelphia, and the Islanders. So those are all bigger games with some implications as well against basically all playoff teams at this point. Except Philadelphia and the Islanders are both fighting to make the playoffs at least. So this is like the one game that New Jersey might actually not be totally focused on here, especially if they think that they're probably not going to be able to make the playoffs at this point. They might be in a kind of bad hangover spot here. So we'll take Ottawa, and then the other game I'm going to jump on is going to be on the Calgary Flames, who they're playing an Edmonton team that I think might not have that much to play for in this particular game. Edmonton up from -165 to -167 as a road favorite. And they're very public with the line ticking up on them a little bit. 94% of the tickets, it looks like, on them. 99% of the cash according to pregame. I don't think we can put much faith into those numbers being totally accurate. But Edmonton is certainly going to be the public team. I mean, they're a playoff team. They're a team that scores a ton. They're going to be in the playoffs. They're up against an eliminated team here in Calgary. But Calgary, I mean, I think when they have the Oilers coming into their house, I think they're going to at least be focused here because this is a big game, man. It's a rivalry game. It's an in-province rivalry between the two Alberta teams here. So even though Calgary looks like they've kind of like lacked maybe a little bit in their last couple games, they lost ugly to the Ducks 5-3. That's a bad loss. Although they beat the Kings before that, so it doesn't look like the Flames are totally giving up or flaming out. Really, it doesn't look like it does not look like they're just not giving effort. I think they just came off a big win against the Kings, had a bad game against the Ducks, and then they lost to the Jets. But you can't blame them for losing to a good team like Winnipeg. Now they're coming off that. They've lost a lot of games recently, man. 7 of their last 8. But like I said, I'm not sure they've given up. I mean, they lost to Washington, who's fighting to be in the playoffs. They lost to the Canucks. Can't blame them for that. They lost to Buffalo, who's not even really that bad. The Blues are fighting for a playoff spot. I mean, yeah, you should win like some of these games, but still, you can't like blame them for most of these losses, really. The Chicago one and the Anaheim one are the two ugly ones, I guess, in the recent stretch. With the Oilers coming into their house, man, the Oilers kind of being the big brother at this point in their province and in the division, and Calgary sitting now 2 games below 500. I think they're going to want to make that record look a little bit better. Edmonton's fine. They're going to be in the playoffs. They've clinched a playoff spot. They don't have that much to play for now. They're sitting 5 points ahead of Vegas, so they're not that likely to drop down below Vegas either. They're almost locked into the 2 spot of the Pacific at this point. So I think Edmonton does not have that much to play for in this game. And they're on a back-to-back. They're playing a 3rd game in 4 days and a 4th game in 6 days, all in different cities. And it is actually also a 5th game in 8 days, too, with 2 of those games being at home. Weird schedule. They had an overtime loss to St. Louis on the 1st. A loss badly, 5-0 at Dallas in a return home spot for Dallas, where I thought Edmonton would play a closer game there, although the final score is a little bit misleading. Then they came home for a game on the 5th, which is kind of weird, and beat Colorado, and that was their most recent game yesterday. They beat Colorado 6-2, and now they're on a back-to-back, coming off a huge win over Colorado. I don't think they're going to have full focus on Calgary, man. A big win over Colorado, and they have Vegas, the returning champs, up next, so they have 3 days off before that, too. Having this one road game where they're going to Calgary, not a great spot, and like I said, back-to-back, 3rd game in 4 days. 4th game in 6, all in different cities. Not a good scheduling spot. And on top of that, basically it looks like a sandwich spot for Edmonton here. So Calgary, I think, might have more reason to show up in this one. And Calgary does have a day off and has had a less tightly packed schedule in the recent few days. So Calgary is going to be the play there, and you can get them at a decent underdog price, plus 146 right now. I think that's value, man, given the situation there. I think you're getting some nice value on the Calgary Flames, so we'll do that one. And then going into baseball, I only have one play in baseball, even though it's a full Saturday card. There's not much that I like in baseball. I'm going to what tends to be my bread and butter, man, and I'm taking an under, and it's going to be the under in the Dodgers-Cubs game, which, I mean, this is a game between 2 big-name opponents here, so like if the recreational bettors are coming in and playing this game, they're not going to be playing an under in a game where they know these teams have pretty good hitters on them, the Dodgers and the Cubs. But this looks like it's a pros versus Joes type of market situation on the total here, with 70% of tickets on the over, it looks like, but 73% of the cash coming in on the under. You get under 8 at minus 110 right now, it looks like, without much difficulty. I don't know if you can get better than that, but I like the under here, not just because I think the public is going to come in and think, whoa, these are 2, good offensive teams, 2 good teams that are like name teams in baseball, Dodgers, Cubs. They're not going to be playing an under in a game like this. And they probably don't really know who these pitchers are, although there was some hype around this Dodgers pitcher they got over from Japan. But they don't know who Wicks is for Chicago, but that's why I like this even more, man. Like I've been saying, like with yesterday's under that I played in the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, you get these pitchers that the recreational bettors don't know and haven't heard of. They're not going to be expecting these pitchers to come in and do well, but you got to dig deep, see who these pitchers are, because usually when you're not familiar with them, that could mean that the opposing hitters are not familiar with them either. Yeah, and that's the case here. Neither of these pitchers have been seen before by any of the opposing hitters, so both of these pitchers are an unknown to these hitters. I mean, I think that's an advantage to both pitchers here, which I think is a good spot to play an under, man. Because when you want a game to go over a total like this, you typically do need both teams to be able to put up some runs in the game. And with both pitchers having an advantage, I think that's going to be a tough ask for both teams to be putting up good offensive numbers against pitchers that they've never seen before. Wicks, like I mentioned, I think I played him in his first game this year, right, against the Texas Rangers, which they won. He didn't pitch particularly well in that game, though. He walked too many guys. His strikeout numbers were good, but he threw too many pitches. Had to be taken out after 4 innings, but his strikeout numbers were good. He does have decent strikeout stuff, although in his 7 starts last year, his strikeout numbers are a little bit low, and his walk numbers are way too high. So that's something he's got to get down. He's a young guy, though. He's only 24. He's a lefty. So he comes at people with, an odd arm angle that hitters might not be totally used to yet. So I like all that as a decent advantage for Wicks. I played on him a couple times last year in his rookie season, too, for similar reasons, where he's facing batters that have just never seen him before. For a shortened kind of rookie season, there were 7 starts. His numbers weren't that bad last year, except for the walks. But his stuff is decent enough that he was still able to kind of get away with those walks and and finish the season with a mid-4s ERA, which isn't great, but it's not horrible. People are also going to look at Wicks and say, oh, he has a 4.5 ERA this year. But yeah, it's in that 1 start that was kind of a mediocre start, and a 2 whip. That's not good because he walked too many guys. And that's going to mean that recreational bettors are not going to want to play Wicks either because his numbers don't look impressive. But he does have decent stuff, man. As I've been mentioning, he's a young guy. He was a decent prospect in this organization. I think he has potential to get a decent amount better here, to improve in kind of a significant way. And with hitters having not seen him before, I think that's an edge to him. And then on the other side, you got Yoshinobu Yamamoto. I like saying his name. And recreational bettors are not going to want to play an under in a game with this guy pitching either, because they're going to look at him and say he's 0-1 with a 7.5 ERA. Yeah, but that's because his first start was awful, which was a weird game in Seoul, Korea. It was considered to be his first regular season start. It was before the regular season even actually started for every other team against San Diego. A very weird game that was 15-11. He gave up 5 runs in an inning in that game. But then he came out against St. Louis, and they did lose that game too. But his performance in that St. Louis game was really good. A 5-inning performance, only allowing 2 runs, 2 hits, no runs, no walks, and 5 strikeouts. Very good performance for him, and very efficient too, only throwing 68 pitches. So we don't know how long he's going to go in this game, so that is a little bit of a concern, but it looks like they're kind of ramping him up. I mean, he is a starter. He went 5 in that game and was very efficient with his pitches. So if he's able to do that again, I think he'll be able to go deep enough into this game that we don't have to be that concerned about the bullpens here and playing the under. And of course, he's a guy who has not been seen before by the Cubs either. He's only had 2 major league starts in his career. So advantage to both of these starters for that reason, because they're both unseen by the opposing hitters. And yeah, like I said, he had a much better bounce back performance there in his first real start, if you want to call it that, since the regular season actually started. Very good performance out of him, and he got screwed by their bullpen. Hopefully that doesn't happen here, because you do look at the bullpen situation, it's not the greatest for playing an under. And I did mention that yesterday's game wasn't that great. This game's actually a little bit riskier, but I like the starting pitching matchup here still, and I think it is conducive to an under here. If you want to play the first 5 innings under, I wouldn't mind that either. The bullpens are a little bit dicey after yesterday's game. Let me see here. What do we got here? Oh, wait a minute. They didn't play yesterday, did they? Oh, well, then what am I even saying? Then this is a surefire. Yeah, I don't even know what I'm saying. If they didn't play yesterday, then yeah, we're really in good shape here. Is that really the case? For some reason, I thought this 9-7 game was yesterday. Yeah, it was. I don't know what I'm talking about. It was yesterday afternoon, though. I don't know. For some reason, in the MLB schedule that I'm looking at here, I didn't see it up there. But yeah, it was yesterday. That's what I thought. But yeah, so it was a high-scoring game, which is also going to kind of make the recreational bettors not want to have anything to do with an under in this one. A 16-run game between these two teams yesterday. Why would you ever want to be so insane as to play an under in this game? But I just gave you all the reasons why. The bullpens aren't in that bad a shape, even though Miller did terrible for the Dodgers yesterday. Had to be taken out in the 2nd inning. The Dodgers were able to use a couple of guys for a lot of innings there. They had 2 guys combined for 5 innings out of the bullpen, including 3 innings from Grove, 50 pitches, which I think he's kind of a long relief man. He's been in and out of the starting rotation. So the Dodgers were able to save a lot of their better relievers. The Cubs did have to use a couple of their better relievers. I believe they did use their closer to finish the game off, Alzolay. I don't even know who these teams use as closers now. Like, I'm not as familiar with the player personnel as I once was. I used to know every player. I don't anymore, which even though I'm betting these games, I'm sorry I don't. But it looks like they did use one of their better setup men and their closer. So they're probably both unavailable in this game. But to eat up the rest of the innings, they used Drew Smiley, who I know who he is. He's a long relief man and has been in and out of the starting rotation for the Cubs as well. So he was able to make it so that they didn't have to use up as many of their relievers. So I don't think the bullpen situation is as bad as it could be here. So that's not that bad. Hendricks, I keep calling him Kendricks because his first name starts with a K. Kyle Hendricks didn't have a good start yesterday either, but he did go 4 innings in the game. So that's going to be that, man. So I do think the bullpen situation isn't horrific. It's not bad enough that it's going to make me not want to jump in on the under in that one. So that's the only MLB play. So those plays today are in college basketball, though it is the night game. Alabama team total under 74.5. Hopefully these feel risky. And I don't know, man, when you feel not great about some of these plays, sometimes that's actually better. I don't know. Excuse me. In the MLB in the afternoon, Dodgers, Cubs under 8. And then the 2 hockey plays are Ottawa plus 100 and Calgary plus 146. That's going to do it. Peace out. Have a good Saturday. Final 4, baby. Peace.